the beasts, or you're not going to see any of that stuff, right? They don't do that. If you notice, they don't do that. They don't talk about the wars and the kingdoms and the 10 horns and none of that because they think that's all
Yeah.
fulfilled.
Yeah, but we could say that that's assumption, right?
We could say what?
That's assumption.
Of course.
Yeah. So if people don't bring up the beast and things like that, so like Daniel 7, for example, when it
Mhm.
talks about the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Now notice that Daniel was given the interpretation of what the beasts were. The beasts are four kings which shall arise out of the earth, and then the kingdom will be given to the saints during this time.
Right.
And it talks about clearly the end, like the end of the age.
The kingdom and the dominion of the greatness of the kingdoms are going to be given to the saints of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and dominions shall serve and obey him. So, not the saints obeying him, but the dominions shall serve and obey him. So, if that's the case, are the dominions serving him now? I think we can comfortably declare that as a no.
It says that these beasts will be allowed to continue for a time. So to me, I put that, and then I put Daniel 12. God speaks to Daniel twice and says, seal this up. This isn't for you. This is for those who are in the end time. They're going to increase in knowledge in that time, right? So during that time, they're going to increase in knowledge. That's beginning of Daniel 12. And then a few verses down, it says, seal this up, for this is for the time of those in the end. And so only those in the time of the end are going to be able to understand what these scriptures are talking about. Because in Daniel 7, it specifically says that these are beasts that will rise from the earth, is what it said. So that's my overview of when I'm reading Daniel. That's how I'm reading it. But I do understand too that there's some things going on in the current Daniel's current time. You know what I'm saying?
Well, hear me out on this. These guys, all right, we're not just dealing with preterists or partial preterists. We're dealing with either post or amillennialists, right? So with the post and amillennialists, they could literally come up with the same interpretation for you with Daniel and all that. They can say all that happens, but when the time comes for them to be destroyed, it's the eternal. There's no millennial kingdom, right? So it depends on who we're talking to.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
preterists will say everything's fulfilled, but then they have to come up with something weird. But the amillennialists and the post-millennialists can. It's just hard, dude. It's not as easy as you think. It's very difficult.
No, yeah, I do. I'm starting to realize that because but what I am sensing from it all, when I'm listening to it, I'm like, all right, so for example, the beast, right? The beast, there's no explanation for that stuff. We're just supposed to assume that was already fulfilled. And so to me, it's a lot of assumption, but so the way, people can view it how they want. The way I'm viewing it is God was talking to Daniel about the end time. And he said, seal this up. It is for them in the end time.
Mm-hmm.
Because Daniel, even at his time, he didn't understand it. So a lot of people want to say, oh, well, these beasts existed in Daniel's time. But if they did, then Daniel would have understood the beast, at least one of them.
Right, because he had to get his visions explained to him.
Right, he would have at least understood the lion, and a lot of people interpret that as Babylon. And so he would have at least understood that much, and wouldn't have to ask, "Oh, what is all this going on?" And so, but anyways, I was reading Daniel 11, like towards the end, because some of it is kind of, you're like, your mind starts going like, whew. And towards the end, it's talking about like, it's talking about the prince, and people assume that that there's only one prince in the book of Daniel, but Daniel's talking about two princes.
Are you talking about the king of the north and the king of the south?
He's talking about prince. He's talking about a prince that's coming. Jesus Christ that's coming to end sin, to end not completely end sin in the whole earth, but you know what I mean. And then he's talking about a prince that's coming. That's because a lot of people want to say it was Titus, right, in AD 70 that trampled over the temple and things like that.
There's a problem with that for me though, because
Okay,
Titus doesn't make a covenant with anybody.
Right.
Or you could say he tried to, but it's not like Daniel says though. Not for years. Not the covenant that the prince makes with Israel is that he protects Israel for what, 3.5 years?
Okay, so you're talking about the end of the 3.5 years at the end of the 7 years is what you're saying?
Yeah.
He shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished, for what is decreed shall be done. He shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers or to the one beloved by women. He shall not pay attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. He shall honor the God of the fortress instead of these. And God, whom his fathers did not know, he shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. Those who acknowledge him shall be loaded with honor. He shall make them rulers over many and shall divide the land for a price. Okay. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind with chariots and horsemen. And okay, so we're not getting into these kings. We're not getting into these kings, right? And with many ships, and he shall come into countries and shall overflow and pass through. He shall come into the glorious land. Tens of thousands shall fall, but these shall be delivered out of his hand. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries. The land of Egypt shall not escape. Okay, but news from the east and the north shall alarm him, and he shall go out with great fury to destroy and devote many to destruction. And he shall pitch his tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. So that ending verse kind of, that verse 45 makes me wonder. He shall pitch his tent between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. So it's almost like this is a future event. That there's an end to all this, right? Because it says, yet he shall come to his end. All right, so right. Chapter 12, at that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has a charge of your people. He shall and there shall be a time of trouble such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. Jesus talked about that. But at that time, your people shall be delivered. Everyone who is named shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. Some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt. This is talking about the end.
Right.
So there's a prince. So the only reason I'm bringing this up is because some people want to say that the prince that Daniel describes, that there's only one prince that he's describing. There's obviously more than one. And I mean, there's even a third prince, which is Michael, the great prince. So
I have some questions. That prince you just described said he would not do something with the God of his fathers. Now I have two questions. Either that means A, is that talking about someone that's going to erect a new God, or B, is that an Israelite?
So this is what I think, based off of other things that we can talk about in another video. But I think that it's the God of his. Hold on, let me see. So a God whom his fathers did not know. Hold on. And shall speak astonishing things. He shall pay no attention to the gods of his father. Okay. So it's saying gods. So it's not talking about Almighty God.
Right.
So this can't be a Muslim. and this can't be an Israelite because they don't serve multiple gods. Everybody can argue idolatry and this and that, blah blah blah. You know, this whatever.
So
But
this is a new God on the scene that nobody really knows about.
he shall pay no attention to the gods, plural, lowercase g, of his father.
Huh.
So to me, this represents more. It's more aligned with the Catholic Church to me, because you know they actually have things that they worship that Jesus said don't do that. Don't create things. You know.
Yeah, it don't fit Titus at all, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it don't make any. So there's people who will say it's a Muslim, other people who say that it's Israel, but
It's coexist, right?
to me that's what it is. It's he don't pay attention to any of the religion that
Exactly.
He's you could say that he's pure atheist or he's
It says something about the God of he will honor the God of forces.
honor the God of forces,
Yeah, what is that?
like armies.
It says in chapter 11, verse 39, 38.
Daniel 11.
Yeah,
You said verse 38.
yeah.
He shall honor the God of fortresses instead of these. God of okay, so I'm in ESV, so I don't know how it's translated for you.
I don't know what that. I mean, I don't know who the God of fortresses or whatever is.
What does it say? What does it say on your side?
I'm looking at a KJV. Let me get an NIV. I mean, NASB. I think it's very ambiguous here. It's in the NASB, but instead he will honor a God of fortresses, a God whom his fathers did not know. And this is how he will do it. He will honor him with gold, silver, precious stones, and treasures, which Titus did not do. Some people try to say Titus put an emblem of Rome, but I mean Titus completely smacks the temple down.
Yeah.
You know.
I guess I brought this up because people say that I was just reading this and people were saying that the prince. I was trying to figure out if there's one prince or two princes, right? Reading Daniel's 70 weeks, and I was reading it, and I'm like, man, this is kind of starting to get a little bit confusing. But then I read chapter 11 and 12. I'm like, there's no way that the last 7 weeks happened in AD 70, because right here we're seeing the end, and it's talking about people being raised to life. You know, being found in what does it say exactly? It says, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake.
Right.
Everlasting life, right? So there's just no way that this is talking about the end.
Well, hold on now. You know what they do? They allegorize everything.
Yeah, but that makes it impossible to argue against.
Right. So let's try to still man their position. If you allegorize this and you say Jesus figuratively resurrected the dead there, who are the ones that are allegorically in everlasting contempt? And I'm pretty sure I know who would say the Jews. See how they would do that?
Yeah, so you have to argue two different things.
Yeah, depends on who you're talking to.
But what about the people that okay, so
would be believers?
Saying that there's two resurrections of people from the dust of the earth, right? They're not saying that. But Paul,
if they take it allegorically, then being reborn is being resurrected figuratively.
Yeah, but this is talking about those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake.
That means death to me.
That is death. You like, people can say, oh, well, that's, be like, I mean, they can say that all they want, but you read that and you can see, and you have Paul, he says, he talks about those who are asleep shall rise, and then those who are alive also.
Right.
So, So that's what you brought up last time. That was your point last time. So if they can't be saying that there's two different resurrections of those who are asleep, this has to be aligned with what Paul's saying.
Right.
Unless they believe that there's two resurrections of those who are asleep.
Well, James does, and that's why he brought up. Remember what I told you? Seventh-day Adventists have a millennial kingdom in the heavens, meaning at the rapture, people will be alive with Jesus for 1,000 years, not on earth, and it'll only be Satan alone on the earth for 1,000 years and his demons, right? And then the wicked will be resurrected down there with the enemies, and then Christ will destroy them all. And I was like, that's because when we asked James, who are these people with the beast? I mean, Satan, when he's released for 1,000 years. So he had to add that in there because it doesn't make sense if Satan is alone with his demons on earth. But Revelation says Satan is released and he's tempting those people. Who's he tempting if everybody's with Jesus for the rapture? And what they're going to be doing for 1,000 years is going over the books of the living and the dead and proving God righteous. So he came up with a whole different thing.
But he said it was like we're going to be in heaven during the 1,000 years.
Not heaven. We're going to be. He says there's 3 visitations of Jesus.
Okay.
The incarnation is one, the
Okay.
rapture is the second one, and the parousia is the third one.
Okay, so does he believe that the great white throne judgment is also?
Yeah, because he has Jesus coming down from heaven halfway to earth, right? And then the rapture, everybody's caught up in the air with him. So everybody's caught up with him. They stay there for 1,000 years in peace with Jesus, and then once they descend all the way to earth, and they destroy everything.
Then who are the people that Satan is deceiving at the end?
Bingo. And that's when he was asked that, he had to say that those bad guys were resurrected down there with Satan, where Satan was.
Huh?
And that they don't make it. It made it. He threw off everything. So who I was really going at it with is Solomon, because his interpretation is good and it's challenging. You know.
Yeah. I don't know what his interpretation is.
His interpretation is that we're in the kingdom now. And I asked him, I said, so we're New Jerusalem now? He goes, yes. And I'm like, okay, good. I'm glad you said that, because but you believe a literal New Jerusalem's coming, and the descent of the literal New Jerusalem is going to destroy everything, right? So you don't really have a time limit, or you don't have a time to where the bad guys, the bad nations are serving Christ. He's just obliterating everything, right? And so my timeline, for 1,000 years, these other nations that are not believers will serve Christ and his followers, and during that process they may become believers. And so he's like, no, there's no second chances. Your second chances now, right?
But there are scriptures. I was reading it the other day that said that they will be required to come and meet him once a year.
See how this lines up perfectly with Daniel 7, the verses that I brought up before. The nations, the beast, will be allowed to live and continue for a time, so people will survive. And right here it says, everyone that is left of all the nations shall serve the Lord once a year.
And he said they were trying to say that's fulfilled through the lens of the New Testament. And the example of that is, we got the wise men, right? But I'm like, wait a minute, though. It says they'll get no rain.
And if the people of Egypt, and not only them, but the nations who do not go up to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacle, they will not be provided rain. So the question is, at what point of history did the nations not get provided rain because they did not go up once a year to worship the Lord?
You'll have to allegorize a lot of things here. That's what I have to go back and watch what he said, because he said, and he kind of gave me an example, which I still disagree with, but I'm looking at it. And so the way I see it is, because he's like, well, it doesn't make sense if you have you know, proponents of the Mosaic law in the New Jerusalem with a temple, he says that doesn't make sense. It's like you're going backwards, right? And I'm like, well, I understand what you're saying, but nobody said that's for believers.
It does not make sense if nations were to go up and serve the Lord once a year if you assume that the second coming of Jesus Christ is the great white throne judgment. But it says right here that there is a second death. So when does this second death happen? So it does say that the devil will be bound for 1,000 years. But we can't be in the 1,000 years now because, as we saw earlier, the nations are still not obeying and going up to the Lord once a year. Meaning it'll be mortal people, the nations who survived, those who survived, going up to the Lord once a year. But also, the second death doesn't happen at the beginning of the millennial reign because remember, even the sinner will live beyond 100 years. But if we're in the millennial kingdom right now, neither us who have the Holy Spirit, neither the sinner is considered accursed if they live 100 years old. So we'll live much longer than that. So it only makes sense that those who survive the second coming of Jesus Christ and all of the plagues, they will be required to go up and serve the Lord once a year.
Right. So if you do have parts of the Mosaic law, right, it wouldn't be for believers. It would be for those that haven't accepted Christ. They wouldn't be covered. Right. So they would have to do those things in order to get their atonement until they accept Christ, which is my only argument against that. I don't know what you believe in. I don't know if you believe there's going to be a millennial temple with sacrifices. I don't know what you believe.
Well, actually, I haven't. You're the person that actually started making me think about that. So, but that scripture, what scripture is it that says that they will be required to come once a year?
Zechariah 14:16. And the only reason I say that is because the Feast of Tabernacles has the most sacrifices out of every feast there is combined. So I even tried to allegorize it for them. I said, maybe it's not the Mosaic covenant. Maybe through the lens of the New Testament, they have to just come pay tribute to Jesus, which is the tabernacle. I tried that.
The only issue with that is, as we said earlier, they who do not go up to serve the Lord once a year, they will have no rain. So when did this happen? It hasn't happened yet.
So when I read, okay.
There's just no fulfillment of that I don't see, because Zechariah says a lot of things like this, okay? When Zechariah says, in that day you will know the Lord has sent me. Well, that's telling you that I will be verified as a prophet in that day. You'll know what my words were from God. And the Trinitarians use it and say, oh, well, in that it just means, the Lord has Yahweh sending Yahweh, which that's not what I think is going on here. What I think is going on here is a lot of prophets give a way in the far ahead of time prophecy, and they're not validated till it happens. So an angel doesn't have to say, you'll know that Yahweh sent me. You're an angel. You don't have to say that. A prophet has to say that, right? So in order for these prophets to be verified, some kind of fulfillment of what they said has to happen. Future. Right? So they got all of it fulfilled 70 AD, but I guess they have a belief system, but they don't have the way all the details are worked out.
Yeah, so you're talking about verse 17 when you're referring to no rain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because 16 says, then everyone who survives of all the nations, that is in alignment with Daniel 7 when it says these beasts will be allowed to continue for a time. So the nations that rise up against Israel, Jerusalem, they're going to be allowed to continue. Those who survive, the nations that survive, shall go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the feast of booths.
Yeah, but here's what they're doing. They see those beasts, right? And they'll go to where the beast is thrown into the lake of fire, right? So who are the nations that are surviving? And all I have to say is, well, the beast is really people against Israel.
What beast? talking about? What do you
The
mean?
beast system. But just because the beast system is thrown into the lake of fire and then Satan's bound, right? The beast is thrown into the lake of fire. Satan
Yeah.
is not. Satan's bound first.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So their argument is if the beast system is thrown into the lake of fire, who are these other nations that are allowed to come into the kingdom that are not believers? And my answer to that is you have people out here that aren't necessarily against Israel. They're not believers.
Revelation 11:10 says, "They shall be tormented," speaking of those who took the mark of the beast, "with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels in the presence of the Lamb." But specifically those who took the mark of the beast. Not everyone is going to take the mark of the beast. And actually, the scriptures actually say there will be specific nations who escape out of the hand of the Antichrist, let alone the nations that were allowed to continue to live for a time in Daniel 7.
But to me, that's what it is. And it says that the whole earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord.
Right.
So I don't know how I don't get what I mean. I get that they allegorize everything. I understand their point, but
And so I brought them to another passage in Isaiah 60. I can't remember the passage. I have to go get it. Where the young child, if he dies at 100, he will be considered accursed, and the sinner that lives at 100 will be considered blessed.
So how does the sinner, right? Okay. So let's say what they believe is true. All right. We are in the millennial kingdom right now. We know what the scripture says about those who are in the millennial kingdom. But we don't even live, most people don't live to 100 years old.
Right. And I asked Solomon if he took it as hyperbole. He said yes, but even if you take it as hyperbole and you don't take it literal,
but why take it as hyperbole?
Because you don't have people living that long literally right now. So he would have to take it as hyperbole because no one's living that long.
So back in the day in the Old Testament, was that hyperbole as well?
Well, that scripture I'm referring to, if you go look at the academics, it's talking about the Messianic age. But here's the deal. When you're talking about the Messianic age, it's not specific. Is it a millennial age? Is it the eternal age? What is it? It's just a Messianic eschatological passage, the world to come.
I don't think it even matters, because the thing that comes to me is like, okay, but so he has to, I get what you're saying. He has to take it as hyperbole. Like there's no, but see,
but even then, it doesn't make any sense because you have the Messiah coming to destroy everything. And if we're in the kingdom now, and you allegorize it, that means believers are living this ultimate good life, and the sinner that lives. It doesn't make sense to me when you allegorize it or give it. You're not giving me any substance. You're just saying it's allegory and then wanting me to move on.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And that's exactly how I feel too. It's like, oh yeah, it's all fulfilled. Just move on.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, but what about you know what I'm saying?
Well, I wanted to go to some of their challenges when he asked me, so you have procreation in the millennial kingdom?
Okay.
And he goes, right. And I said, yeah, I have procreation. People are going to be having sex. And he tried to trip me up. And he was like, well, it says here, those that are resurrected, I'll be like the angels. They won't be able to procreate. And what I should have said was, that's the ones that get the glorified bodies. Not everybody's going to have glorified bodies. And I wanted to take him to a passage where Daniel says people will have different kinds of glory, right? But then I didn't want him to take what I said and said, well, just because they have different kinds of glory doesn't mean they have different kinds of glorified body. I didn't want it to get all weird.
Yeah. And doesn't even Paul also say that there's different kinds of flesh?
Yeah. Yeah. So those ones that will be like the angels, if you go to that, there's a Zechariah passage where it says the house of David and all them in that day shall be like the angel of the Lord. Okay. And so all the passages of the angel of the Lord, you don't see him procreating at all. He's just a messenger. Okay. So how would they be like the angel of the Lord? Well, the only thing I got for that, is in the millennial kingdom, those other nations are going to have tributaries. They're going to come bring their tribute, but they're still going to have to be taught about Christ. So the law is going to go out from Zion, Christ's law in the millennial kingdom, and people that are being born, they still have to be taught. Now, here's the thing that's going to stump me. Is there going to be a set time where people are stopped from being born? Are they just going to keep being born? You see how it does get a little strange on our end too.
Okay, so the thing that comes to my mind is the scripture that says, "And of his government there shall be no end." Is that what you're kind of?
Yeah, but the way I take things, and they don't take it this way, I have Christ after the millennial reign giving the kingdom back to the Father, meaning for me, he's no longer king. They don't like that because they're saying, well, we see him just giving the kingdom back as he's perfected the kingdom and now he's handing it back to the Father, but he's still ruling, which is fine. Either way, I could be wrong, but I do have the Jesus giving the kingdom back to the Father because there was one point where Israel had no king and they wanted a king, right?
Mhm.
And Yah was their king. Now you still had even in the garden, you had a representative, Adam, but I don't know how else to take the passage. He's
Yeah.
going to give the kingdom back.
Well, to me, it seems like so God, when Israel wanted a king like the other nations, the prophet was messed up about it. God was like, "Look,
It
let him
was
do.
bad, right?
I got a plan. There's like, huh?
It was not a good thing. So look, here's the difference though. When they asked for that, when they told Moses, "Hey, can we don't want to hear God's voice no more." God says something strange. He says, "Okay, they spoken good." However, the strange part is in the law, the Torah, you have laws for a king, right? It's like God already knew what they were going to do. And when they asked for a king, they got rebuked because they rejected God as king, asking for a human king. Doesn't even matter if it was an Israelite king. God took that as a diss, right?
But at the same time, you got to think God knows, because
Mm-hmm.
without, like what we were talking about earlier, um, without mortal putting on immortality, without knowledge passing away, gifts passing away, without us looking through a darkly lens, without that passing away, it was going to be corrupt eventually anyway. God knows that with
Well,
human.
that kind of hits them too. Even though I'm not a full cessationist, uh, I'm not a full cessationist. Okay, I believe in the gifts. I believe they're being abused. However, these guys have to be full cessationists because if there's gifts right now, then everything is not fulfilled. And I'll tell you why I say that, because if there's gifts now, that means the perfect has not come.
Right.
Right. So I don't understand how that fits into they have to say the perfect is the canon or something, but
Well, I know that there's at least discernment left.
but you have to say that because we're over here still talking about God and studying all these things, and you can't, like,
Discernment is one of the gifts.
yeah,
So
exactly.
if you're going to say you have discernment, then you can't be full cessationist. You can't.
Right. And then there's teachers and all kind of things. So
What's the point? But
but I don't understand where that would cease. If you're in the kingdom now, why you have the gifts?
right.
That's my point. I don't, it don't fly with me. I don't understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't, my thing is this, there's another passage. Let me get this passage. Hold on.
But
I'll give you what I got.
go ahead and find that passage. But I want to bring up Luke 20:36.
Yeah, do that.
It says, "Neither can they die anymore, for they are equal unto the angels, and are the children of God, being the children of the resurrection."
Mhm.
So if we're resurrected right now, how is it that we're still dying?
That, and check this out. Remember when Jesus says those that take part in the first resurrection don't have to worry about the second one.
The second one. Mm-hmm.
But they're taking those resurrections as the same event. Or are they saying, see, that's the thing, or they'll allegorize the first resurrection, right? And they'll say, well, those that are believers that have been reborn don't have to worry about the lake of fire. But I don't take it that way. I take it as two literal resurrections, one of the righteous and one of the unrighteous.
But you got to think, though, Paul said when he went to court and he got put on trial, he said, everybody, listen, I'm not here for what they accuse me of. I'm here because of my hope in the resurrection of the dead. So this is Paul, right?
And that's very literal.
What else could it be?
Right, but here's the problem. Here's the problem for me, because I don't have the resurrection of the righteous and the resurrection of the wicked at the same time. I only have the resurrection of the righteous and then the millennial kingdom. Then I have the resurrection of the wicked after that and the great white throne. Yeah,
because it says that. It says literally at the end of the 1,000 years that the ones who did not partake of the first resurrection, then yeah.
That's my view, and that's not I'm not saying people are being resurrected to join Satan's army. I'm saying people that were in the millennial kingdom, and that's 1,000 years. You could have a lot of people then that don't have glorified bodies. They're going to be the ones that get deceived, and then after that, then the wicked will be resurrected to judgment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but if Jesus is speaking in allegory in Luke, not sure how that's going to fly. All right.
Have everybody participate for part 2 or part 3?
Whatever you want to do. I mean, I need to get a lot more verses prepared so I'm not just scatterbrained.
Yeah. All right, man. Yeah, if you can, send me some other verses, because right now we did not. Wait, did we touch? No, we didn't touch Zechariah 12.
Right.
John 19 or Revelation 1.
Well, we'll get it.
Okay.
All right. I appreciate it.
All right, man. See ya.
Later.